Greetings. My name is Eli. I'm the host of Ask an Artist, where we discuss the philosophy of being an artist in modern times. Thanks for joining me. This is our first show. The goal for this show is to ask different indie comic creators or just artists in general to get their philosophy and thoughts about what it is being an artist in these weird times. We got AI art, we got social media, we got algorithms, we got people just trying to steal art. It's weird. So I wanted to kind of share my thoughts and also get the thoughts of some of my peers. This is our first time recording, so it thought it would be weird if I interviewed myself. So what I have is my friend who's going to be asking the questions, and I'm going to be answering them. Yeah, let's get into questions.
So who are you and how did you get started with art?
Yeah, so my name is Eli Beaird. I am a indie comic creator, indie tabletop game designer, tabletop enthusiast. I've been drawing since before I can remember. I always tell people I've been an artist before I was me. When I gained sentience and understanding of myself, I was already drawing things. So it predates my identity. So I didn't really start doing art professionally until I got out of high school. I became a character artist at Six Flags, which was just a local theme park near my neighborhood. But after that, I then went to college for graphic design. Started working in the field there. And right around that time, I also started taking my creative works a little bit more seriously. I started going to conventions, designing games, talking to other comic creators, and just kind of getting my process together in a way that I could do it consistently. Although it was still a hobby, I didn't really get far into it until I was working regularly, and then I worked on my creative endeavors on the side. But they were just mostly for me. I was going to conventions a little bit, but I wasn't really pursuing it in a way to make it profitable or sustainable. But yeah, that's kind of how it went.
And what are some of the comics that you work on as an indie comic creator?
Oh yeah. Thank you for asking. I work on. I think my most popular one is Alien 101. No, that's not true. I did illustrations for a comic called Dog of the Dead, which was written by Maxwell Shepherd. That one got really popular. People like dogs and zombies, to my surprise. So that one was cool. Comics that I work personally on that are just me. I have Alien 101 and Action Land, which are my longest ongoing projects. I'm actually going to be revamping them this year, kind of getting them together in a volume to sell at conventions and online too. I'm going to start trying to create a more digital presence. But I also did some work with Janelle Grace on her story Love Conquers All. Made it a short indie film, but also has a comic book to go along with it. And that comic's mostly just about trying to encourage mental health and therapy within the Black community. Let's see. I think that's most of what I'm working on. Aside from that, I'm working on a big card game called Scattered Nexus. Every year we kind of partner with 6 new indie comic creators to turn them into cards. They'll make a fun little card game that you can play together.
How would you define what an artist is?
Let's see. How I define an artist. I feel like an artist it's a little nebulous. I've talked to a lot of musicians and poets and writers, and I feel like art is a creative expression, but I feel like it's an umbrella term for a lot of other things. I feel like as we usually describe it, we're talking about visual arts, ways to create visuals, painting, illustration, comic books, things like that. But I do feel like most creative endeavors fall under the art spectrum. I feel like, I guess that's kind of one of the reasons I made this type of channel, is because I kind of want to get into that. I feel like there is a core part of the human experience that causes people to want to create art. I don't know if it is like a fear of mortality where they're trying to leave something when they're gone. I don't know if it is a feeling of expression where people feel like they need to express certain feelings or aspects of themselves or aspects of their identity. I don't know if it's a element of connection where they want to be known or understood by someone through these subliminal clues or messages through the artistic medium. But I feel like, to define it as well as I can, it is someone who has something they want to say, and they are trying to find the medium in which to convey that message to other humans. And however they decide to do it is how they do it.
And this core part that you're talking about, that the art and the creativity comes from. How would you define that?
Hmm. I'm not sure. I'm trying to figure out if it is like the equivalent of the soul, or if it's a social construct, or if it's an individual thing. Humans have been making art since as long as they've been humans. So it feels like it has to be something intrinsically tied to human nature or the human experience. The way I think about it is that the world or creation or existence, maybe consciousness itself, creates a feeling that makes you want to express it as you're going through life and having these unique experiences that are just kind of generally yours. Because even if you and someone else are experiencing the same thing, you'll take different things away from it. So I think it's like a buildup of these experiences that kind of cause you to want to convey it or express it.
What unique experiences have you experienced that
Hmm.
have contributed to your art?
Huh. That's a tricky one. Like, I feel like growing up, I always thought I was an artist. My mom always encouraged me to do art because I was good at it. And I thought it was a good way for me to get some attention from my peers. I think that's how it started. Ultimately, I started finding genuine joy in it and expressing myself in those ways. But there was definitely a point, like right around me graduating high school, where I realized that although I had the ability of making art, that wasn't the part I liked. I started trying in like fine art and photography, and those didn't hit the right way. I could make really good paintings, but it didn't fulfill me in any way. So what I found is that it is, in fact, the storytelling aspect that I really enjoy. I like telling stories. I like beginning, middle, end, people doing things because of these reasons, people expressing themselves in ways, even though they're fictional characters. I found that part much more fulfilling or rewarding. So I feel like that is when I started finding a new way to express myself. And I felt like that was a more true sense of the art within me to kind of talk about and to use, if that makes sense.
Is that how you got into creating things like Alien 101 and Actionland?
Yeah, I mean, Alien 101 is pretty much just a story about an alien in high school understanding what human love is based on my own love life. So it's really awkward. And then we also have Actionland, which is about an artist who has overactive imagination working at a theme park. She sees her customers' problems as monsters and her art as a sword to defeat them. That's based on my experience working at Six Flags. So, yes, it was me having these new experiences, learning these weird life lessons, and then me wanting to tell that to someone. But just telling them doesn't really work for getting the message across. I know because people tell me lessons in life all the time and I don't listen to them and then I just do anything else anyway. So I found that if you give people the pain of it through these fictional characters, it sinks into them a little bit more. And that's kind of what I wanted to convey. And yeah, so that's why I kind of started doing it. Although that was back in high school. It wasn't until I got out of high school that I really started paying attention to the art of storytelling and how to convey messages in that way. And then I feel like the story got much better after that.
How did you get into game design?
Oh, I like thinking that I got into game design. A little bit of it is me and my social awkwardness. I call board games social lubricant. They kind of help to navigate through a social interaction. So originally, I just liked the foundation, the rules that board games and tabletop games had, where they tell you how you're supposed to interact with people. I always had trouble interacting with people. So when they were like, hey, you're playing code names and you can only give people a word and then a number and then that's how they you are going to interact with these other humans. I found that very relaxing and refreshing, and then I didn't have to worry so much about it. So I wanted to create more things in that space. I liked it so much I wanted to take some of those experiences and even some of those games that I liked, small tweaks here and there, end up making you a game designer. It's a very slippery slope. First you make one house rule, and the next thing you know, you're making a whole rule book. So yeah.
How did you get the idea for Scattered Nexus and creating that card game?
Oh yeah, that one was kind of serendipitous. That one was me at a convention. I was hanging out with a local comic group called Scattered Comics. We were all hanging around, and I was just like, I was playing Yu-Gi-Oh at the time, and I was like, oh man, one day my comics will be so popular that I'm going to have a card game made about it. And just some of the creators next to me, they were in the game a lot longer than I have. I think they were manning convention tables for like 10 years longer than me. They were like, yeah, we all had that dream, but you kind of let it go after a while. We're indie. We're not. No one's really coming out here sniffing for our IPs. They're always looking for the Marvel or DC or more polished things. And I was like, oh, that kind of sucks. But then I was like, you know what? I made a card game back in middle school. Maybe I'll make a card game for us. And if like one of us isn't a big enough IP, if all of us work together, then maybe that would be a big enough IP to like draw attention or become popular. And that's kind of the catalyst for Scattered Nexus is that idea that like indie comics should be celebrated and that the community has a lot of cool, awesome stuff in there that we could all leverage.
How does game design factor into your idea of what an artist is?
That's a damn good question. I guess the same way. I feel like storytelling and illustrations, that's like trying to convey a message kind of quickly. Illustrating Dog of the Dead was people reading it and coming back to me saying that they were crying about it. I'm like, yes, I wrote some things on a paper and then you cried because of the particular lines I wrote in a particular order. And that's fun for me. But what I find is that that's a very like one-sided experience. I'm kind of leading you down a road and you can't really do anything else with it. Maybe after the story is over, you can have your theories and your hypotheses, but that's kind of it. But when you're making a tabletop game, card game, board game, whatever it is, you are creating more of a sandbox for an experience. You're saying like, you're kind of giving them a range. You're going to have something within this realm that I've kind of pre-made for you, but you get to express your own agency within that sandbox. One of my favorite games is Twilight Imperium, if you're familiar with that. But Twilight Imperium is a big space opera war game. But within that game, you can be like diplomatic peace turtles, or you can be a giant insect alien race that's all about war. Like you can kind of put on that role and kind of play within the space. And I think that's the exciting part. You can't ever dictate exactly how it goes. You can kind of just point them in a direction. So I feel like that's the artistic element of tabletop design is that you're kind of curating an experience, but the people who are going to be experiencing it are so far distant from you, you might never even meet those people. And they're going to tell their own stories and have their own experiences with the thing you created. I guess in a way that's still very much like art, but I don't know. There's something different there.
What have been some of the biggest challenges in creating Scattered Nexus?
Oddly enough, the biggest challenges with Scatter Nexus were kind of getting over my own shyness about talking to these comic creators. Like it started off with, of course, the creators from Scattered Comics, who were just all my friends. They all kind of hopped on, but then it was like, okay, I did all those. Who's next? And then trying to get into people's inboxes and trying to find them online to ask them to join the game. Luckily, everyone who's joined is very, very happy, encouraging, and excited about it. But there, at the beginning, I was really nervous about like their, people are precious about their work. They've worked for years trying to create these comic books, and then some stranger coming up and asking to use their IP, I thought would be taken wrong. But yeah, everyone was very encouraging. A lot of them were actually flattered that I wanted to join a card game I was working on. So that was pretty cool.
What have been the hardest parts about creating your own comics?
Oh, making my own comics. That's a whole different beast. With a card game, you can kind of be like, oh, you had a bad game? Well, hey, cards, right? That happens. If you make a bad comic book, people are like, yeah, you're not good at this. So it's a little bit more pressure. But I think the hardest part I've had was conveying a message concisely, like eliciting the correct emotion from the audience. I can kind of put things in there that I'd respond to a particular way, but it's hard to guarantee that the reader or the audience is going to pick up what I'm putting down. Especially like when you're using references or like weird inside jokes that I think are funny. Like having to get rid of a lot of those for more standard jokes, standard setups and payoffs that exist completely within the universe or the world without relying on any outside factors. I think it's also keeping characters consistent. You always want them to have an arc where they're growing and learning and experiencing things in a believable way. and sometimes you really want to just learn the lesson so you can move on to the next plot point. But yeah, sometimes you make a character and they're a little hard headed, so sometimes you got to go the hard way.
What's the most fulfilling part about creating comics and board games?
Ooh, let's see. So I find the most fulfilling part of creating comic books or games are finding fans that really enjoy the message, who really get enjoyment out of the world, the story, or the interaction. But there is another thing that I thought was like fake, but there's a phenomena that happens when your character has enough agency or you've put enough into them that you kind of they become something outside of yourself. So you're trying to make them do something in your story, and the character tells you no. It's in your head, but the character's like, I'm not. No, why would I do that? Not going over there. Not talking to that person. Not fighting that thing. I'm just not doing it. I would do this instead, and then you kind of your story ends up taking a pivot to try to compensate for this character's autonomy, which is nonsensical, I think, to non storytellers. But it's a weird real thing that happens. So that's fun.
It's not nonsensical, but I am very interested in that part about a character taking on a life of its own
Mm.
and then dictating what it will or won't do. Could you talk about that process and how it developed over time?
Yeah. An example of that, let me give a professional one that I've heard happen, and then one that happened to me personally. I'm a big Jujutsu Kaisen fan. Shout out to all my JJK fans out there. Season one, when Mahito did that domain expansion, right?
Spoilers?
It's season one. I don't know. Is it? Uh, uh, they said that the seven third sorcerer and Nabara were supposed to die season one, but as Gege was writing it, he said Yuji wouldn't let that happen. He'd just jump in there to kind of stop anything from happening. He'd protect his friends at any cost. So Gege changed the story to accommodate that. After Mahito opened up his domain expansion, Yuji jumped in there, and then Sukuna did this thing, and then yeah, but it changed the plot of the story. I'm not going to tell you what happened season two and beyond, but that is how like a character's autonomy kind of changed the story separate from what the creator originally intended.
So when we talk about man and Alien 101, what was he like before he gained this consciousness or sentience within
Hmm.
you?
Man was originally just a gag. He was just a lot of me being autistic, not understanding social norms, and then he was kind of the outlet for that. He was just walking around, not understanding social norms, and then that was the whole joke. Get it? Because he doesn't understand the social norms. After I became a little bit better writer and started actually putting a little more effort into Man, he became a expression of that same type of thing, but trying to approach it genuinely. He has a distinct curiosity into other humans and people and how they interact, and he really wants to know and be a part of that world. And because of that, he takes certain steps to try to accomplish it, and he at points even takes on the acts of cruelty, not physical cruelty, but like kind of psychologically, in order to try to bridge that gap or try to understand or control his environment or situation. And I feel like all those are like good lessons that people could learn through him in that way, if that makes sense.
Why do you think man had to resort to cruelty in order to bridge that gap?
It's kind of the same way children are cruel. It is a lack of familiarity or understanding of the weight of their actions. I feel like the same thing happens with just life. Is that when you're a child and you're first interacting in these social situations or meeting people for the first time, you have desires, you have wants, but you don't know how to go about doing it. So you just kind of do whatever the easiest, fastest way to do it is, not understanding the consequences of it. And it isn't until you understand the consequences that you then learn, like, oh, that isn't the way I should go about it. And man needed to learn that stuff the hard way because as an alien, he has more powers than the average human. So he has like abilities that allow him to take these shortcuts, and he needed to learn that taking those shortcuts was the wrong way to go about doing it.
How much of the changes in man do you think reflected your own growth?
Yes, a lot of people have pointed out that man is probably just me. You got me. Yes, it's a lot of just me and my understanding of relationships and human interactions. So it was, well, although I didn't have alien powers, at least not that anyone could prove, I also tried that in a lot of my relationships, at least my early relationships, not understanding the consequences of it, trying to like, manipulate people or things to kind of get my way or get, small time gains. Nothing too crazy to write home about. They were all small, intimate moments that are probably lost to time. No one remembers them except me, but I do have that like feeling of like trying to like nickel and dime to get a quick something or other out of another person or relationship. So, man was my way of kind of blowing that up into a larger, exaggerated, more magical or fantastical nature to kind of examine that in different ways. And in a way, it was helping me to explore the ramifications of those actions as well. So, yeah, I think it pulls like double duty in that way.
With Alien 101 being so much about relationships and growth, what would you say is the most important thing that you've learned about relationships, and what advice would you give that younger version of you about relationships in order to try and help him like skip over some of the more difficult aspects?
That's a good question. Although it comes in two parts. Well, first, I'll answer the latter first. I don't think I'd be able to tell younger me anything because he was an idiot. He didn't know what he was doing. Like he had other people giving him advice too. He wasn't taking any of it.
You had it
So
all figured out.
right, right,
Been there.
right. So it would be a waste of breath to try to tell him that stuff. But what the message I would try to say would be to practice self love and reflection more often. With it's also another element. It's like even in Alien 101, there are relationships that happen that I'm like, this isn't going to work out. They think it's going to work out. They're trying really hard to make it work out. It's not going to. So, like, there are some times where, like, people aren't compatible. They don't have the things that they need from each other. And I don't know, that's a shame, but it is a reality. But even in those other cases where it does work out, you do find people that are compatible and kind of paddling in the same direction. Like, I find that you need to practice self love, care, and reflection. Like, I found a lot of my insecurities in my relationships were from a lack of understanding myself or giving myself the things that I needed or desired at the time, or even being afraid to ask a partner for those things. Like, growing up, especially growing up male, I felt like there was a lot of you need to be aggressive and go out and get stuff and then don't take no for an answer and do these things. And it's like, I wasn't that dude. I was just trying to draw stuff and watch anime. A lot of that stuff was a little bit too much for me, but I tried to fit in that role and it just kind of caused more complications in the relationship because I wasn't being my genuine self. So it's like learning who my genuine self was and then also understanding what that person needs. And then it allows you to be in a better spot to help the people that are around you, the people that you care about. And also, I think making way for a lot of different types of relationships. Movies teach you one or two types of relationships. There's a whole spectrum and plethora of relationships. So it's fine to let them be what they are instead of trying to force them to be something that they're not.
I also want to shout out the JJK fans. I've only watched the first two seasons. I didn't read ahead, but I love it as well.
Nice.
But what are some anime inspirations or just inspirations in general that you had early on that helped you with your art?
Brian O'Malley touched on a lot of like slice of life elements with a lot of magical fantasy elements on top of it. There were a lot of anime and video game references. So it just got to show me that like you can express your interests in your story and people might actually like it. So I think that was a really good lesson. And it was a very compact story too. I have all of Scott Pilgrim. Brendan Mulligan was also a big inspiration. You might know him from Dimension 20. He's the guy who's, does a lot of role playing games. But some people don't know this. He did a story before that called Strong Female Protagonist, which is a comic I really want, Scattered Nexus. I can't ever get in contact with them. Anyway, that one was fun. It was kind of taking superheroes, but kind of getting into the intimate ins and outs of like their day to day life and relationships and just the small things that tend to be overlooked, and they were done in a very creative way. So I like that. Another one of my big inspirations was Osamu Tezuka. He was the guy who created Astro Boy. He created so many other comics after that. I think that's the one he's most well known for. But I stumbled across one of his books in a library, and what I loved about it was that the art was very simplified. The characters were very like chibi or cartoony. The backgrounds were really detailed. The page composition was pretty crazy, but it was like he was able to tell really interesting adult stories and kind of flip narratives on their head really easily in those stories. And that was just really inspiring for me. It kind of taught me that, like, the story is the focus of it. Like, the art, of course, elevates the story and kind of brings it to a new place. But if you have some strong bones, then that kind of creates it. Oh, and one more. Sorry, this list could keep going, but last one. I really like Clamp, another manga group. That one was a group of creators that decided to get together, but they created Sword Captor Sakura. They created a bunch of stories, but what I liked is their panel layout. They were able to kind of minimize the panels. They would have each page would have 3 to 5 panels on it, and it would really allow you to get into the story and have these nice set pieces and to tell these stories in these interesting ways. So that was a big inspiration for me too. And now, since then, I'm very particular about panel layout and legibility because, yeah, they taught me that legibility can really elevate and escalate a story as a tool. So, yeah.
Is there anything that you have coming up that you'd like the people to know about?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So I have a couple comics coming up, but that's going to be later on in the year. What I have going on right now is a crowdfunding campaign for Scattered Nexus. We just got 6 new comics that we're partnering with, all from a comic group called Nerd and Addicts. You can see some of them behind me, actually. That's what I'm using as my backdrop. From Last Magician, and then the one behind me over here is from Frontier Forever. And yeah, they're just really cool comics that agreed to partner with me, to let me use their IPs for this game. We're going to be launching it on Backerkit on April 15th, which is probably, yeah, soon, 3 days from where I'm recording it. So I'll try to get this up as soon as I can. But that one's gonna be fun. We're gonna have all types of goodies, and Skynex is an ongoing project. Every year we produce a new box that has 6 comics in it, and you can play the whole game with each box. It's self-contained, standalone game. You just shuffle together 3 comics to make your deck, and you battle your opponent. But if you want more options, you can get some of our previous boxes from our last years in order to add more possibilities. I think with one box you have like 20 deck combinations. If you get all our boxes, we have like 4 now. I think there's 2025 combinations. Sorry, 2024 combinations. I remember because it was last year was the same number. And then we're going to keep doing this until we partner with 90 comics. And that point, we'll have over 100,000 combinations for decks. But yeah, please go over there, go to Backerkit, show your support, follow it, like it, and I think you'd like the game. There should be all types of goodies on there. Actually, we're giving away a free game map to anyone who backs it in the first 48 hours. Thanks for watching. Really enjoyed this. Thank you for my host asking the questions.
No problem.
As we get further into this, I'm going to start asking questions and trying to get existential with some other comic creators. If you have any questions that you think I should ask, or you have any comic creators you want me to track down to try to get into this, let me know. And yeah, it should be fun getting existential with artists. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next world. Bye.
Later.